r/AskReddit. What the worst I don't fit in here experience you've ever had? Wanted to learn to play guitar. Found out about a class for beginner sessions for adults. Call up. They say yeah, come along, we have a mixed group and we will see you in the morn. Great. Turn up to this little church, like building, and head in. Guy says you must be me, 27 to 28 at time. Take a seat and we will get going in a minimum. Please note I'm first to arrive, and the seats were tiny, but I didn't think anything of it at the time, just assumed it was what was available. Next minimum a group of small children rush in and take their places, about 5 to 6 years old, with their guitars. Teacher starts taking the lesson. I'm OBV feeling awkward as I'm like Tom Hanks in Big and wanting to get out as soon as poss, but too polite to just get up and walk out. Teacher then announces that we will be getting up on stage at the end to show what we've learned. Please note all these little shits are 10x better than me, but I'm committed now and maybe it won't be so bad. Until the door opens and all of the parents walk in to watch the show. So there I was, sitting on a little chair with my knees higher than my head, strumming along to some tune I couldn't play, surrounded by 5 to 6 year old and parents looking at me with that face you know wants to laugh. Edit. Wow, just woke up to a ton of notifications. Only this week have I received my first silver and now I have more golds and silvers. Many thanks. So I read all of your comments and had a good laugh along the way through listening to your stories. A few answers for you guys. Mixed group. No idea how this went from mixed to a group of 5 to 6 year olds, but I didn't want to say anything at the end as the kids/parents were still there. I just wanted to get out of there as quickly possible. Did I carry on with that group? No way. With guitar? Kind of, but not really. I can play a couple of easy bits now, but didn't really stick it through, so it was all for nothing anyway. The story. Yeah, it was really embarrassing at the time. The look of one particular parent is ingrained into my soul, like a mixture of trying to hold laugh in / you fucked up / I can't wait to tell my mates about this. It's never failed to give people a laugh when I've told them about it, and I'm glad it has made you guys a smile / lol. Walking into the cafeteria, food in hand, looking around trying to find a place to sit. Or alright guys, get in partners for this project. And you just sit there with your eyes glued to the desk. So the building that I work in has an exclusive cafeteria, and by exclusive I mean that it is only for employees of the insurance company that occupies floors 10 through 18 of our building. It is not for us lowly administrative employees of a major cancer center that occupy floors 5 through 10. We have all heard rumors about this cafeteria and its delicious fresh food plated in a mat rivaling the fanciest Michelin star restaurants, all for low prices. So of course I had to go. The cafeteria is situated on the 15th floor. I got in the elevator only to find that one cannot access the 15th floor without a badge. The button simply will not press. Cue me riding up and down the elevator for 10 minutes until I was fortunate enough to ride with a chosen one with a badge. Sweet. Forbidden cafeteria food awaits. So I casually follow this person off the elevator, lurking behind them as they badge into the cafeteria, which encompasses the entire floor in all its exclusive glory. I quietly slip in, wearing my own badge obscured by my cardigan, so that it's obvious I'm wearing a badge, but not so much what it is. Once inside I marvel over my choices. So much delicious food everywhere. A pasta station, salad bar, a fresh grill, fresh pizza, daily specials, a carvery with an array of smoked meats. I'm in heaven as I blissfully make my way through my selections up to the cashier. At this point I'm terrified, thinking that she is going to ask to see my ID, but she does not. I pay for my food, a meager sum of $7 or $8 for a king's ransom in deliciousness, and thinking that I have pulled off the greatest heist of our time, I make a break for the exit. It was then that I discovered you do not only need a badge to get in, you also need to use your badge to get out. Here I'm with my ill-begotten bounty and I'm trapped. The door is locked, and now heads are turning in my direction. They know I have been discovered. My only recourse at that point was to hover, head down, around the condiment station gathering random ketchups and soy sauce until some unsuspecting people decided to legitimately exit the cafeteria. I dashed out behind them, my face awash with embarrassment, and loitered in the hallway until they left in the elevator. At that point I returned to the 6th floor in shame and enjoyed my semi-cold forbidden food. That was when I felt like I truly did not belong in a cafeteria. I came to Germany in 2017 with my Master of Science in Environmental Sciences from Hungary. A job to find was hard, so I had a plan B. I took a job by Deutsche Bahn, German Railways. I don't really know how to say it in English, but basically I controlled train stations and set routes for trains. Called Fahrdienstleiter in Germany, look it up if you want to. So I took the schooling, I had my first station, and as an apprentice or something like that I had to go to the tracks and inform people about where their train comes. I felt pretty shitty. It's normally not part of the job. All the passengers were well-suited men and women. Lots of offices around here, and I was in a dirty safety west. I just felt that I belonged to them, not here. In the end I found myself here. My next job will be at the central station in Nuremberg, which is a pretty big deal, like a flight control tower with trains. I fucking love trains. Edit. Thanks for the kind comments. My mum and dad have been divorced since I was 8 years old, so 20 years. My dad has a girlfriend who he's recently moved in with. She has adult children and young grandchildren. Anyway, it was my dad's birthday a little while ago, and I went over to see him, and over the time I was there, more of his girlfriend's family turned up. I didn't fit in. My dad has kept us very separate until the last 12 months, and I've worked really hard on my relationship with my dad over the last few years, but had thought he wasn't able to give me the relationship I wanted to have with him, and I'd come to terms that that is how he is. Except it's not how he is, at all. Because he has that relationship with his partner's children and grandkids, and I sat there feeling ridiculously out of place. I didn't fit in. He only lives 25 minutes away, but they've all made very little effort with me, but they all see each other a lot. I didn't fit in, and I left after 4 hours, driving back to my home with tears in my eyes, wondering why I was so upset. And then I realized, it's because, once again, it's just another situation where I don't fit in. And I'm not gonna lie, that little 8-year-old girl inside of me cried a lot for a week or so. It was by far the worst I don't fit in here experience I've had yet. It broke my heart a little, actually. Sorry for rambling. I guess I kinda kept that to myself. Definitely university for me. My family were very pushy that I go to university, mostly because they saw it as the best way to get out of my hometown, where there was no real work opportunities. I got knocked back several times until I finally got good enough grades to be accepted on a maths-based bachelor's program. The classes were both intensely boring and way over my head at the same time. My classmates were all nice enough, but came from a more middle-class background, and as such we didn't have a lot in common, and the issues I was facing, financially, didn't seem to affect them. I ended up working full-time on top of classes to pay my student accommodation. My parents made too much money for me to get any real amount in loans or bursaries, but they had a ton of financial responsibilities and couldn't afford to help me out. I ended up getting drunk every morning to stop caring about feeling out of place or out of my depth. Showed up to work drunk on a daily basis also. The last straw for me was when I was in a communal area of my accommodation preparing my work uniform, and one of my classmates came in and asked if I was getting ready to head to work. I said yeah, and he replied, yeah, I know what that's like. I had to get a job last summer, so my parents would buy me my car. That really just summed up how different I felt. I ended up leaving at the end of the year with nothing but a bit of debt and a job as a waiter, but leaving was honestly the best decision I made. I've had so many it's hard to pick the worst. It always hurts, but as I've got older I'm learning to cope and actually appreciate it for what it is. Looking back on my life, I've never actually fit in anywhere. I've coped and I've even made friends for a while. I'm not completely hopeless socially, not shy and happy to chat to anyone. I'm happily married, so I'm not completely repulsive. It's not even that people actively dislike me. I'm sure if I got hit by a bus tomorrow people would turn up to my funeral and say nice things about me. But I've never found my people in the way that people talk about, and currently have no one barring my husband I could truly call a friend at all. I've realized that I'm always slightly different and out of step somehow, and that's what's behind it. There is just something about me that silently signals odd one out. I know in my heart that if there was ever a real honest witch hunt again, I'd be one of the first people implicated, because I've just got that wildebeest limping at the back of the herd vibe about me. The mob would pick me off and no one would really feel guilty because, well, she was a bit, odd. I was recently given the cold shoulder by a group of people I've known for years, and it made me realize that I didn't fit in and wasn't cared for by this group of people either. It hurt a lot at the time it happened, but in a way it's also been very freeing. I think I might as well just be me and not worry about what people think are just going to end up not liking me anyway. I'm a filmmaker. In my younger years I made a film that was received well, and I got invited to speak at a big shot conference. Oscar winners, high-flying producers, big-name actors. No one gave a shit about my little talk, and in between sessions I had no one to hang with. It felt like shit. After the first day of a 3-day weekend I went to my hotel room, had a panic attack, and cried to my BF via Skype. I'm a fairly confident person, so even as the weird one at school I never really felt out of place. But that conference was the worst. It was the only time in my life that I felt like such an awful, horrid, worthless loser. But I knew I had to stick it out if I wanted any sort of career in the industry, so I took a deep breath, gathered all the dignity and courage I could, and forced myself to go back the next day. I suffered through the quiet moments pretending I was back at school and didn't give a shit what anyone thought. It also helped a lot to put things into perspective that the conference was going to be one of many moments in my career, and that people were just there to do business. I could potentially come back someday with some business for them, and then people would talk to me. That was easy for my ego to understand. After I gave my talk, I actually got approached by some producers. They gave me their cards, and I made some connections I still talk to this day. But that first day will always stick with me, and once in a while, when I'm feeling like a cocky ass, as I normally do, I think back to that low moment, and it helps to reorient my thinking. Even if I had walked away from that weekend with 0 cards, it would have been worthwhile, just for that change in mindset. I was a young woman who worked for an environmental justice non-profit, very much a hippie chic kind of person. We helped an event at Sundance Film Festival for a counter-independent film festival. At this event, there was a person who was working the ticketing. Me, being the technologically challenged nature lady that I was, had a hard time logging into the Wi-Fi. This was like the early 2000s before smartphones and stuff. It was all still new. Anyway, dude gave me his email, and after the festival we became email pen pals. Fast forward a few months, and I'm planning another event in New York City for said organization. Dude lives in New York City and we make plans to hang out. I also ended up staying at his apartment, but a guest room. We hang out, hold hands walking around New York City. I'm still a hippie chic environmentalist, in all honesty, I still am, just toned down a bit. It's fun, and we like each other. A little bit after that, he invites me to his friend's extended weekend get together at his friend's ranch in New Mexico. I can fly for free, because my dad works for an airline, blue collar job, not as a pilot, so I say yes, and meet up with him for the weekend. So I get to the airport, meet up with Jude and his friends. First thing, we had a private party bus to the ranch. Weird, but okay. I get there, and the place is a fucking mansion with servants and all of that. His friends are rich brothers with supermodel girlfriends. Some of them were actual professional models. And I'm not. It was the most awkward weekend for me as the vegetarian, hippie chic, environmental justice, non-profit working, poor person. Not supermodel self. Could have ever had. Anyway, I really did not fit in there. My fiancé and I like coffee shop hopping on Sunday afternoons after mass. There's this really cute, but semi-mysterious looking one by his place with some innocuous name like Maple Creek Coffee Shop. It looks like it's been there, unchanged, for 40 years. I tend to like those kind of reliably quaint diners, so one Sunday after mass, we decided to try it. We walk in, and I immediately know we are not the clientele they are looking for. First of all, it smells musty. It's dark inside and there aren't any tables or couches or chairs, but rather some grimy looking booths and a bar that look like they haven't been cleaned since Clinton left the White House. Everyone turns to the door and stares at us. It smells vaguely of rancid milk, sweat, and marijuana. A woman shooting pool in the corner glares at us. We are the only tattooed people in there. We are wearing our church clothes and clutching book bags. I wordlessly take my fiancé's hand and back out the door. I don't think we'll be missed. I got put into the advanced art class in high school. I signed up for intro to art, but I think something got mixed up. The teacher starts talking about how this class is really gonna take a lot of time and hard work. How he expects us to submit artwork for at least 3 national competitions, and a whole bunch of other things. He's a new teacher, because the previous one retired, and he talks a lot about how the class isn't going to be any of this touchy-feely nonsense you won't get by with subpar art. The class, about a dozen students, are all nodding and taking everything in stride. He asks us what our specialties are. Some kids say pencil sketches, and he says that's a good start, but pencil isn't really a serious medium. Some kids say painting. One kid says sculpture. It gets to me. I don't have one. What do you mean, you don't have one? The last art class I took was in 6th grade. We should talk after class. Yeah. Dropped that course like a hot potato. Took music technology instead. Had a blast. Teacher was apparently pretty good according to the students who kept with the class. It just wasn't gonna happen for me. I grew up in a Christian household, where we were members of a Methodist church, regardless of what town we moved to. For most of my young life, I considered myself a Christian, as that was how I was raised. In 8th grade, my church's youth group went to a Methodist youth retreat at this giant hotel in another city that included a convention center. It was this crazy convention type event with workshops, prayer groups, and a gathering at the end of each day in the main hall. There must have been 2,000 kids there from all over the Midwest. Well, during the second night of this 3-day event, we all gathered in the main hall, prayers were said, and young hip preachers and music groups performed. I found myself feeling completely out of place. While all of these other kids were lifting their arms in the air, yelling praise God, and singing along to the Christian songs, I stood there questioning everything I believed in, and astonished at the insane energy of everything. I would continue to consider myself a Christian for 2 more years, but I think it was just so I felt like I belonged to a group. Never truly believing in the spoken word, sermons from my church's pastors, or teachings from my confirmation classes. Later in my life, I realized that was my first true realization, that I did not belong to the Christian religion. I will never speak ill of any religion, as I understand how others can believe in one or the other. Fortunately, my family is very understanding of my beliefs or lack thereof, even if many of them could be considered old-fashioned, or what I call hardcore Christians. Not me, but this story is too good not to share. When my dance instructors were younger, they spent a year teaching and performing at a luxury resort in Malaysia. One day, one of them decided to go run errands in town before they had to perform that night. So he went into town, but the errands took longer than expected, and he realized he wouldn't have time to make something to eat when he got back to the resort. Not wanting to perform a long set on an empty stomach, he stopped into a KFC for a quick bite. As soon as he walked in, he realized he had made a mistake. The place was packed with people, all staring at plates of food in front of them. No one was eating. The guy behind the counter looked uneasy as he rang my instructor out, as he clearly realized this Russian dude was oblivious to what was going on. except that it dawned on my dance instructor that it was Ramadan. Everyone was sitting, waiting for sundown. Only, my instructor didn't have time to wait. He needed to be back at the resort by sundown, or he was going to be in some serious trouble, not just with the resort, but with his wife/dance partner. Instead of, like, taking the food to go, or eating it on his way back to the resort, I've never gotten an answer as to why he didn't do either of those things. He had to find a seat next to some other people, because the place was so full, and apologize, and eat his food. I can't even imagine the looks he got. His wife says second-hand embarrassment is so real, even a decade later. And yes, he's still embarrassed too. I had started dating this beautiful girl towards the end of high school. We had been friends for a while before we'd started dating, so we knew each other really well. The first few times we hung out at her house, I kept getting really weird vibes from her parents. They weren't abrasive and would probably seem very friendly to most, but there was a bizarre undertone to them that didn't sit right with me. It was little things at first, blatant materialism and a near obsession with how they appeared to people around them. Then I started noticing the constant little digs they made towards my girlfriend. It only took me a couple of months to realize that they were full-blown narcissists, which I had unfortunately encountered before. As our relationship grew, I naturally had to spend more and more time with her family, including extended family gatherings around the holidays. The entire extended family had narcissistic tendencies as well, and they would all take turns sniping/tearing each other down. It became clear to me over time that the expectation was that I was going to conform to their behavior, to somehow be okay with their behavior and in fact, enable it. I felt like the only sane person in the room, and found myself isolated, unable to fully help my girlfriend understand just how toxic it all was. The relationship ended on bad terms after a while, but I feel like I won on some level. I don't have to be around that horrible family every single holiday or try to raise children around them. Ugh, it's almost hard to pick. Pretty much every time I'm in a church. I'm not religious at all. Any sort of service makes me a little uncomfortable. It's better when it's not a religious event. My community college graduation was at a church, but at that point I can't help but think, what church? The 3 years I spent at a state university doing a major I realized wasn't for me. I didn't live on campus. I was a little older as I transferred after graduating from CC with an associate's in arts, and I felt like I was in a different place in my life. Not to mention the school was so big I felt like a number. It felt impossible to get help when I was struggling, and I went through a depressive spell which made my grades worse. At least I got out before I graduated, but still almost a complete waste. A lot of my jobs felt this way as well. My last job was a cashier in a hardware store, and I felt so out of place. I knew nothing of anything in the store, with no interest in trying to learn. Because I was only there while I finished school, because the grocery store job I had before got to be too much to bear. I'm not a person that would regularly need to shop in a hardware store, and it made me feel very much like an outsider, even if my coworkers were awesome. It's not as bad now, but I work in a help desk role for a healthcare conglomerate now, and it still sort of feels that way, because I don't know the first thing about medicine or doctors and nurses. Just today I had to get one of my coworkers to show me what one of the computers on wheels the nurses use, because where we work phones I have no visual reference for a lot of the hardware they use, which makes troubleshooting hard. At least I have an interest in learning, but at a certain point I'll probably leave the company, because healthcare is not something I have an interest of spending the rest of my life in, even in an IT role. Going to a Christmas party hosted by the family friends of my boyfriend. We were 19 and had been dating for a little over a year at this point, and hadn't gotten to know each other's families very well because we had been going to school out of town. My boyfriend grew up pretty well off in comparison to me, and the circle that his family associated with was pretty affluent as well. My boyfriend's dad was a university professor in civil engineering, and his mom was a real estate agent who worked primarily in the very nice neighborhoods in town. We pull up to this enormous beautiful house in a nice end of town and walk inside easily one of the most well decorated, lavish homes I've ever seen. I'm introduced to the parents, both engineers, one university professor, and one top-end executive of a large engineering consulting firm, and their 3 adult children, 2 engineers, one who did social sciences and has done very well for herself. The night primarily consisted of conversations about all the good times the 2 families had experienced together, traveling through Europe and Australia, going on ski trips, and on summer vacations on the lake at the family's cabin. As someone who grew up too poor for family vacations, had a high school dropout mother and first-generation Canadian father, this whole mix of seriously educated people and upper middle class lifestyle was so strangely foreign and almost surreal to me. Of course, they were polite and asked about my life and my family to get to know me, but my responses were in a different stratosphere from what regular conversation was that night. I felt so uncomfortable and out of place the whole evening and ended up making an excuse to leave early. It was sort of a definitive point in our relationship as well, because I realized that I was never going to be able to fit in with the crowd that my boyfriend grew up in. We are still together, and we actually got engaged a few months ago, but his family has never liked me. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.